rising from 12.3 trillion naira in 2023 to 27.1 trillion naira as of July 2026. The Nigerian Revenue Service says the growth is largely driven by reforms aimed at expanding collections and blocking revenue leakages. Now, the Revenue Service points to digitalization of tax collection, 4 new tax reform laws, and measures to close loopholes in the system. It also says stronger crude oil production, improved foreign exchange inflows, and rising investor confidence are supporting the broader economic recovery. The figures show that the tax revenue is not only an area recording growth, as the NGX is also moving, risen from about 30 trillion naira in 2023 to 161 trillion naira in 2026. External reserves climbed $51 billion, where capital inflows are being strengthened. As government revenue climbs, the key question is whether the gains are now moving, as everyone will say, translating to better economic conditions, which everyone says is a face in this reform process. My guest is a development economist, Professor Ken Ife. Prof, good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us on Business Nigeria this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, Prof. I have a slide here, and we'll start with the first one, which speaks to the 27.1 trillion naira, which is what NRS recorded. We are talking about 113% growth, and the tax to GDP ratio seems to be better than what it was at 10% before, and now it stands about 13%. What do you make of this improved collection from the NRS?
I think it's a great move. I'm really happy that we're improving in all fronts, because it's not just the tax reform is very critical to this, because you have those 4 tax reform acts all punching at different levels of our income and improving collection and reducing the leakages, and also at the same time helping the community. In fact, going to boost the GDP without a doubt. But you also have the environment from February this year of oil windfall taxes, coming in, and windfall oil revenue. So that's improving significantly thanks to the palaver in the Strait of Hormuz. So we're a beneficiary of that. Then, of course, you also have our capital market outperforming everybody in the world, rated as the number 1 in the world in this current season. So that notwithstanding, again, we have our key companies, both oil and non-oil companies, are doing extremely well. You have Dangote and MTN, the cement, Dangote Cement, those are the non-oil sector, Seplat, Dangote, Bua Food, all of them posting 14.4 trillion naira and a profit margin of 4.9 trillion. So Nigeria couldn't have it any better. It's been great time. So we just hope it will continue to December, so that we can have a very substantial harvest, at least for now. Even VAT revenues are also moving up. Of course, you have electronic transaction. Do you know that Nigeria has, in the first half of the year of last year, got $550 trillion transaction, electronic transaction? And then, that is because about 3 years ago, we were number 6 in the world. So now we might be around number 3 in the world in terms of electronic transaction. So if you divide that by, let's say, an aggregate of 1,000 naira the transaction, or then that money becomes 555 billion. So it's a lot. It's a lot of money that we are moving in our cashless framework. So it's good. It's good news. However you look at it.
All right.
Moving.
All right, then let's move to the next slide now and see what that speaks to, Prof. The multi-year revenue trajectory. Now, the foundation of this claim, we looked at the figures for 2023 full year, which was 12.3 trillion, 2024, 21.7 trillion, and 2025 full year, 28.23 trillion. Now, if we are already at 27.1 trillion at, like, say, August, as we stand, this is August 11th. Now, what do you think? Is there an issue of expanding the tax net? Some will say, is there an issue of those paying are paying more? Or what really, when you look at what has happened in recent times?
No, the greatest contributor is plugging the hole. Let me give you an example. I train Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission. And why they received a new act, 2025, that allows them to give them more power, more teeth to be able to investigate, carry out forensic audit on the likes of revenue service, customs, and the NNPC. Now, the law allows them to go behind these people, these agencies, and now interrogate the main people who pay into them. But in fact, what then happened was that the president put an icing on the cake by invoking Presidential Order 009 that decapitated NNPC effectively. Because what is done is that NNPC, all these IOCs, were paying to NNPC for them to now pay to the Federation account. So NNPC will deduct 30% and say it's operational cost, and then 30% for frontier basin, and it's only 40% that comes up to be shared by the 3 levels of government. So Baba has blown that away. So now all the IOCs will be sending money direct into the Federation account starting from June. So it's going to get better because more money will be hitting the coffers. And then also, that also means that RAMFAC can now head down to the oil wells and begin to monitor them from the oil head, and then from there to the transfer station, from there to the flow station. So they're going to be monitored all the way through, and they have teeth right now. There are 3 offenses: failing to remit, delays in remitting, and then non-remitting at all. So any of those, you can go for 10 years imprisonment. So you can see that the fiscal reform acts are beginning to bite, and the teeth is being given to the agencies that could do that. They need to do the same for Fiscal Responsibility Commission so that they can clamp down on the debt spiral. But it's good. It's good in all respect.
Indeed. Now, to the next slide now, oil tax revenue, 6.6 trillion naira non-oil. We see oil revenue, that drive to get more funds from the non-oil space. Prof, we've talked about this so many times, years before now, talking about how we could expand our non-oil sector, revenue generation, and all of that. In your understanding and what you're learning recently, what do you make of government's efforts at the non-oil space now? And do you think that oil still has that power, when it comes to revenue generation, overall revenue for government? Do you think that it still has that as it used to be before now? It seems like the non-oil sector is now taking a positive stand. What do you make of the efforts? How would you assess it? What more can be done?
No, I mean, there's improvement. But those improvements I'm seeing on non-oil are necessary, but there won't be sufficient condition to deliver $1 trillion economy. I have to tell you that. Because if you are punching at $6.1 billion on non-oil revenue,
yes,
and even if you multiply it by 8 to give you 48 billion, what is it compared to 1 trillion? So you're going to have to bring back oil, because refining capacity is everything. Not only that it reduces your imports, slashes it, but you also have so much more to export. Just see what Dangote is doing. He's now doing 20% of all the refined product in Europe. He's supplying to Saudi Aramco. He's doing jet fuel, ammonia, phosphate. He's doing anything, PMS, even America is supplying to America. And now come to think of BUA, who is going to start 200,000 barrels a day in Akwa Ibom. Come to think of $50 billion being invested in Ondo for refinery, 500,000 barrels. That's where you're going to get your traction, because all the companies that will downstream companies can establish, just the only example I can give you is Texas, where you have 32 refineries and nearly 5,000 petrochemicals. So if you can imagine 1,000 petrochemical industries surrounding Dangote and all these other people who are going to bring back so you can, and then even NNPC is bringing two of the their refineries back with the Chinese partners. So if you can imagine an energy ecosystem where you now have all these companies surrounding them and using their raw material as input, carbon black, toluene, linear alkyl benzene, ethylene, polyethylene, propylene, polypropylene as input, and urea, nitrogen, ammonia. Come on. That's where you're going to get your $1 trillion economy. But of course, if you want to have a radical shift in the non-oil revenue, then the president must sign the bill sitting there for more than 10 months on 30% mandatory value addition on our raw materials. so that investment can flow into bio-industrial refining and bio-industrial production, and they call that ecosystem. Now you now have people producing, turning the cocoa to chocolate, turning all the gold refining, lithium refining. All of these areas will explode, and then you can confidently talk about bio, and they all have to be targeted at exports for you to generate the kind of traction that you need to get a $1 trillion economy.
All right, Prof. Talking about that $1 trillion economy, the next slide at this dashboard here, it speaks to macroeconomic validation. Look at external reserves. We've talked about this, Prof, so many times. It's at 17-year high at about from $3.9 billion in 2023, now sits at about $51.9 billion as at July. Balance of payments also doing pretty well. Oil production is also on the high side. We've seen increase about 1.73 million barrels per day, of course, including condensate and all of that. And also inflation is printing 15.91 percentage points. Food is at 17.52, which is the worry of many. Prof, again, I would ask the issue of food inflation. Two questions in one now, Prof. How sustainable is this positive looking across board, like I mentioned on this dashboard? And what can be done about food inflation as we move towards the end of the year, and of course an election very soon?
Well, what we have is food insecurity, and then what we have is food security emergency. But I haven't actually seen that in real practice, in the scale that could tip the balance. I haven't. Because if you are not pushing investment vigorous, it's private sector investment that will do what you need to do. It's not this government sharing of this, sharing of that. No. Place a ban on all the raw material being exported, because you're exporting them and importing poverty and exporting jobs. So that private sector can come into the sector to process. They won't bring the equipment if you are still busy sending off the raw material abroad. That's number one. Then number two is that we have to ensure that several programs are on the line. Special economic zone and Southwest, all these, Brazil and all that. We're wasting too much time. 3-4 years now, we are on this. What are we waiting for? And then we have major crops like cassava and all that can turn the economy around in terms of aquaculture and all this food, the feed that they require for us to produce. So there are still a lot of things to be done in that non-oil sector to bring us up to speed. And I haven't seen that we are making enough progress right now. And there's a concentration on palliative, concentration on sharing and distribution. No, we've got to get serious on that. But of course, you can see how serious we are on the oil refining. Don't forget that for over many years, everybody tells you to look away from oil. It was calm now, It was a scam telling you to look away from oil when you have already killed all the 4 refineries. Now, Dangote has come in to say that is wrong. Let's get in and refine our products. And everybody's joining into the bottom. Look, anybody who has money to invest in upstream, in a drilling crude, they want to come to Nigeria. Why? Because you'll be drilling it here, and the places where people are refining it for you right there and then. So it's the most lucrative sector. People would want to come and, but you have to not get rid, but sort out NNPC. Carry them to the capital market. I've been saying this since 2000.
Well, the president
take the NNPC to the capital market so that we will sort out the place.
The president has said that. He mentioned that when the NGX team went to visit, that he is going to make sure that the NNPCL is listed. At least everyone will have a stake in the company. Well, let's move forward. It's getting so interesting, Prof. 4 new laws. You talked about them in your first submission since January 1st, 2026. The Nigerian Tax Act, which consolidates 70 legacy tax levies. We have the Nigerian Tax Administration Act, NRS Establishment Act, and of course, the Pillar 4, which is the Joint Revenue Board Act. Now, for businesses moving forward, Prof, what would you be saying for private business owners, company owners, with regards to tax as we move towards the end of 2026? What should they be prepared for? What should they prepare their minds for with regards to taxation as we move towards the end of 2026?
Well, the tax is very clement on the MSMEs, because in the end of the day, we want to raise our GDP. And the two things you look at are how do you boost aggregate demand, and then how do you boost aggregate output? Those two count. I mean, household consumption is almost 78% of our GDP. And then not to talk of the investment that goes through companies. So And of course, you also have balance of payment that is positive, balance of trade positive, that also adds to GDP. Then the final one is just government expenditure. There's nothing you can do about that. They will keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. Now, the issue is this tax reform has given impetus to the MSMEs. Not only that it exempted some sectors like agriculture and all that, but it has also increased the quantum of money that they turn over before which they're exposed to tax and VAT. So it's rising from 25 million to 100 million. That is excellent. It means that they can now retain much of their revenue and then use it to prevent redundancies and to create more employment. Given that we have structural factors like lack of FDI, high cost of inputs, high cost of petrol, high cost of energy that are already mitigated, and high interest rates that are already mitigating progress in this area. So they are coming through the back door to lift them up. And then on the other side, on the consumption side, you see waivers, removal of all these taxes on the basic thing that household consumes, the medical and the education and all that. They remove all those taxes there. So that means you are also increasing aggregate consumption, because when you remove them, people can buy more. So both aggregate consumption and aggregate output are going to increase. So your GDP is going to increase. So but it's about them taking the opportunity. And then the government should keep on looking at other areas to help government companies, because we know that the CBN has moved out of domestic finance intervention. So the interest rate environment is extremely high. So we have to use fiscal incentives. That's where you need to use this fiscal incentive, because if you don't widen the base, then who are you going to tax?
Obviously. Prof, almost finally, now, looking at the flow, you've talked about Executive Order 9, removed NNPC's 30% management fee and rotated gas flare penalties directly into the Federation accounts rather than through the NNPC. Now, we have increased revenue being shared by states and local governments. We need to talk on this. That's my last question. Yes, actually. What are you seeing? What are you learning, Prof, with regards to the state governors? Talking about what they're doing, local governments, what they are doing, since they have increased funds to consolidate on whatever is coming from the center.
Yeah, one thing you will never take away from this president is that he has actually moved Nigeria, our fiscal federalism, to the highest that any president, no president has ever come close to what he's done. Both from the tripling the revenue available to subnational, that is the states, from 700 billion being shared to 2.2 billion naira being shared, a trillion being shared, over 300% increase. And don't forget that the federal government didn't have as much of the increase as state governments, because don't forget that all the oil things and so many things were militating. And even federal government removed 5% from the 15% inland revenue was charging for collection of VAT and gave it to state governments. So, and then also it's pushed power to the concurrent legislative list, or removing it from exclusive. So the states are playing now. And then it ran to the Supreme Court to get a judgment to give fiscal autonomy to the local governments. And then also now we are having a regional development agencies that are even getting budget to come and organize the local, the subnational, so that you can now have a proper regional approach to economic development, which is the sort of thing we do in ECOWAS. Now, the final one, of course, is that the new development plan, 2026 to 2030, is actually based on activating serious engagement of subnationals, to be led by subnationals, and then secondly, to have a bottom-up, world-based economic development. So you have top-down and bottom-up coming together. That's where you get business done.
All right, it's a good way to leave it. Professor Kenny Fair, I must thank you so much for your time on the program. Always interesting having you join us. Prof, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
All right, then, you heard it from Professor Kenny Fair. What's still to come on